All right, on these problems, we're going to review solving quadratic. So this is an overview of what we've been doing in class. So we want to get the m squared alone. We can do this by taking square roots. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So that gives me m squared equals 8. And then we're going to square root both sides. And now we have something that's not a perfect square, so we need to simplify that. So the square root of m squared is m, and this is going to be plus and minus 2 radical 2. Remember, radical 8 is the same as radical 4 times radical 2, and radical 4 becomes a regular 2. And when I take the square root, I have to say plus and minus. So plus and minus 2 radical 2. Okay, sometimes you need to do more than one step. So I'm going to add 3 here to both sides. So that's going to give me 10r squared is equal to 490. Now you need to get your letters squared alone. So I'm going to divide both sides by 10. So that gives me r squared is equal to 49. And once you get your letter that's squared alone, then you take the square root of both sides. So the square root of r squared is r. The square root of 49 is 7. So plus and minus 7. Don't put radical 7. When you take the square root of 49, it becomes regular 7. So that is your answer. Okay? The next way that we learned to solve these was by factoring out a common factor. So this does not have a third term on the left side of the equal. It's just an r squared and an r. So we're going to factor out a common factor. Well, the only number I can take out is 1, but I can take out an r, and that will leave me with r plus 12 on the inside. Once you have something factored, because this means multiply, once it's factored, then you set each thing equal to 0. So r equals 0, and this would be r plus 12 equals 0. Subtract 12 from both sides, and you get r equals negative 12. So you have that answer and that answer. You should get 2 answers for these problems. Okay, over here on this one, I can factor out a 5x. So that leaves me with x minus 4. So this gives me x equals 0. And this gives me x equals 4. Something like this that has 3 terms. It has an n squared and an n, and then it also has a constant. Those need to be factored into 2 parentheses with an n in the front of both of them. I need to think of 2 numbers that multiply to 32 and add to 12. That's 8 and 4. They're both positive because that'll give me a positive 12 and a positive 32 when I multiply them. So then that gives me answers of n equals negative 8 and n equals negative 4. Okay, over here, the 24 is on the right-hand side. You need to always set things that you're going to factor equal to 0. So you need to subtract 24 from both sides. That'll give you n squared minus 5n minus 24 equals 0. So I have a quadratic. I don't have a number on the n squared besides 1, so I can just go into 2 parentheses and put an n in the front of both of them. And now I need 2 numbers that multiply to 24 and subtract to 5 because I have a negative there. So I need an 8 and a 3. And in order to get a negative 5, I need a negative on my 8, a positive on my 3. That is what is going to be equal to 0. So then each piece could be 0, meaning that n could be 8 or n could be negative 3. Okay, the next 2 are a little bit more difficult. Okay, I'm going to work these the long way. Some of you know a shorter way to do it, but if that confuses you, I think you just need to do the long way. So 8 times 7 is 56. You always start by taking the first number times the last number. Then you need numbers that multiply to this and add or subtract to the middle. In this case, it's add because it's plus. So if it's got to add to 57, that's got to be 1 times 56. So then this is going to get replaced with those things. So you have 8n squared plus 1n plus 56n plus 7. Again, those 2 things with an n on it replace the 57n. Then you factor by grouping. I can pull out an n, which leaves me with 8n plus 1. I can pull out a 7, and that leaves me with 8n plus 1. And this is all equal to 0. So these 2 parentheses should be the same. They are, so now I'm going to factor that out, and that leaves me with an n plus 7 for my second parentheses. So then my answers, run out of room here. This, when I set that equal to 0, it is going to give me 8n equals negative 1. So n equals negative 1/8 for that answer. And then this is going to give me n equals negative 7. So I have a negative 7 and a negative 1/8. Okay, over here on this one, I need to first move the 8 over. So I need to add 8 to both sides. So it's going to give me 7n squared plus 38n minus 24 equals 0. Okay, so then you've got to multiply. So you're going to take your front number times your back number. So 7 times 24 is 168. Now you're going to need a calculator for this probably. I don't know my times tables up to 168 well enough to, off the top of my head, be able to figure out numbers that subtract to 38. So I'm going to just start dividing. I'm going to take 4 into it because I know 4 goes into 16 and 8. So if I divide by 4, well, and that did it. I'm going to get 4 and 42. Because if I do 168 divided by 4, I get 42. And if I subtract those, if I have a negative 4 and a positive 42, that's going to give me a positive 38. So 7n squared minus 4n plus 42n minus 24 equals 0. So this is my work. It's kind of just my scratch work off to the side. This is my equation. So I'm going to factor by grouping. So I can pull out an n. That leaves me with 7n minus 4. So here 6 goes into 42 and 24. So plus 6. So that leaves me with 7n minus 4 equals 0. So those two numbers or those two parentheses I have in common. So I'm going to factor that out. 7n minus 4. Then my second parentheses is an n plus 6. So n plus 6, and that's all equal to 0. This gives me 7n equals 4, because you set this parentheses equal to 0. Okay? So then, let me write this on the back. So you have 7n minus 4, and was it n plus 6? N plus 6. Okay, so what you're really doing is you're saying either 7n minus 4 is equal to 0, or n plus 6 is equal to 0. So to solve this, you add 4 to both sides. So you have 7n equals 4, and then you divide both sides by 7. So n equals 4/7. That's one of your answers. Then your other answer is to solve that equation, and that gives you n equals negative 6. So negative 6 and positive 4/7 are your two answers to that equation. Hopefully that helps you with solving these quadratics.